Hello. Hello, everyone. We are live with a new series called Spiritual Dimension and Special Needs. Amazing, exciting, and I'm personally will take a responsibility for starting it a bit later than originally planned. We were supposed to be here at 4 p.m. UK time, but I think I mentioned I had actually an issue scheduling it at 4 with StreamYard, and the StreamYard did win that battle at the end. So we are here at 5 p.m. UK time. We will reverse to 4 p.m. UK time next week and in the following weeks. But that's not a problem. Let's focus on the most exciting things and our very special guest, Deborah Antich, who is an intuitive and a clairvoyant, and also has been diagnosed with on the Autism Spectrum as an adult. So I've got so many questions to Deborah, for Deborah, and I'm sure there will be loads of questions from people who participate and view, or maybe even on the replay. So I would just say, do not worry, because Deborah will be coming back more regularly as a co-host on some of the occasions. So let's start from your story. And if you don't mind, I want to sort of start with a question, a cheeky one. What was first, the intuitive or the autistic, or the other way? It's how, obviously, being diagnosed as an adult, you have the awareness, and probably you even yourself thought about it on few occasions. So would you tell us all about it, please?
Sure. So, hello, everybody. So that question has been asked a lot of times, and my answer is always, well, first of all, my answer is usually why would it matter? But I'll kind of dig into it a little bit more, which is, we know kind of that genetics can play a role, and then with both, bloodlines play a role with intuition. Bloodlines play a role with any kind of diagnoses, right? So for me, it doesn't really matter which one. To me, I was born with both, and sometimes people tell me all the time, well, this drives me crazy, which is, well, you don't look autistic. And I'm like, because I am in an environment that is working for me right now. I know how to maintain, and I know what I need. And but you put me in a restaurant at 5 o'clock with concrete floors and glass walls, and everybody's tinking all their glasses and their plates, and it's a different story. So a lot of and I also want to say, autism is processing. And now there's so many different levels, stages, on the spectrum of autism, that, and I want to also state that I am high functioning. So, or I'm diagnosed as high functioning. But to answer your question, it doesn't really matter, which is for, and I think they also play off of each other, right? I do believe that. Because of the way that I see things in my mind when I am reading, I see and think in pictures a lot. So that is my answer. It doesn't really matter.
Yes. Well, I absolutely understand what you are talking about when you mentioned that in the right environment, you don't come across as autistic, and that is such a, I know we'll be using sort of generalizing statements, so apologies for that, but that's what it is. As you know, my son has been diagnosed at early stage on the spectrum, and the same goes with him. Even now, when he's 6, I have comments from people saying, "Well, he just doesn't look autistic," and yes, in the safe, familiar environment, everything is working. But Christmas parties, school parties, anything noisy, anything unfamiliar, even an exchange with a teacher, will rock his words really badly, and I can tell it's like the ground is shifting, and and that's what causes that sort of anxiety in case of my son.
I just want to say really quickly that he is very lucky that you are able to recognize that. That, you know, a lot of parents now are really much more in tune with their children and are able to see or even recognize in their own environment, like, oh, this thing is starting to happen. It's going to affect my child. Like this thing. And then just recognizing, you know, that this is we're about to reach a high level, you know, and also I do know, because I've talked to a lot of parents of autistic and just on the spectrum, you know, children, because, you know, as you know, Asperger's is no longer considered its own thing, but it definitely, their characteristics are very, you know, their own thing, right? You know, the DSM-5 doesn't recognize Asperger's as its own diagnosis anymore. But one of the things that I've noticed is a lot of parents, and it does feel like this is for a reason, it's for a purpose, that parents are becoming much more in tune with their children. And just by talking with parents that have children that are on the spectrum, they are able to recognize things within the environment that, for me, I really very much do believe that they are picking up energetically, not only from the environment, but also from their children as well. So, and I just wanted to say really quickly, the reason I was diagnosed so late is I have a son that went through a bit of a mental health crisis, and he went through a diagnosis. And when he did, I said, I want you to test him for autism. And the tester actually did not do that. She said, well, he did not present as autistic. And in my mind, I'm like, she did exactly what people tell me all the time. I've even had a clinical psychiatrist that diagnoses tell me, well, you're not autistic. I don't see it. And there is nothing more infuriating than having someone tell you that you're not something that you are, and that you know you are, and you've been diagnosed. But him and his experience really made me start thinking about me and my own experiences. And I actually, at the same time, I love when things intersect, because I watched a film on Temple Grandin, and they were showing how her mind processes things on the screen. You know, she was there, but then they were showing it. And I was with my mom, and I said, that's how my brain works. Like, that's how I was like, do you see things like that? Do you put things together that way? And we were also with my son's best friend, and she said, no, not like that. And I looked at him and I was like, what about you? And he said, no. And it really made me start thinking. I was like, that is how I see things. And so all these little pieces came together at the same time, which led me to go and get tested.
Yes. How old were you at the time?
So I believe I was 46, and now I'm 49. So just a few years ago.
So quite recent.
Yeah, really recent. Yeah.
Yes. And when you were not diagnosed, you did perceive, obviously you had the same perception, you just didn't know that there was autism spectrum involved. Right. Can you tell us a bit more about your perception of reality? I think it's, you know, for people, especially for the mother, a parent of a child who's relatively young and cannot articulate. And I'm sure it will be different for every single person. But I'm just curious, what do you think is your main difference in perception of, you know, compared to the neurotypical person?
So I'll explain it. I usually, not during COVID, right? But I usually teach in a classroom that's very long. It's tables that are quite long. And I would always tell my class, I see in layers, and I see everything. And they're adults, right? And so they would be like, oh yeah, whatever. And then one of them would do, and especially movements. I see movements almost as if it's happening right in front of me, but it can be happening very far away. And I remember one particular class, and I ask them, please don't text during class. It's very important for me. And I tell them I'm very open, with some of my own things, because I work with people with substance use. And so I'll tell them, look, these are the things that I need for myself. Like, please let me know what you need, to be able to learn the best or whatever. And so I tell them, I see everything. And when you pick up your phone to text, just the movement of your eyes, I see it no matter where you are in the room. And I always tell them, like, oh, people think, oh, I'm going to be slick. And they kind of leave their phone in their lap and just look down. Well, that movement of looking down is the only thing I can see in the room when it happens. And
Wow.
so, and they'll do it. They'll try, they'll
Yes.
try and do. And then I'll be like, hey, what's up over there? And they're like, oh my God, how did you see that? And I'm like, I told you how I see it. And it doesn't matter. It's just you're affecting my ability to teach. So, or to facilitate. But so that's one of the things that happens is I don't really know how to explain how I see in layers, I guess. So this might be the best way to explain it. I used to coach my son's soccer team, and I saw the field in dimensions. I mean, really, that's the only way to say it is there's a closer dimension and a further dimension. And things that were happening like way over here affected things that were happening way up here. So I could see plays being put together way before they were really happening, only off of a touch or like a certain movement forward. I could see, okay, this kid way over here is getting ready to break. And so I would coach my team according, prepare up front, because this is happening way back here. So I can really see things way before they happen because of just the teeniest energetic change.
Yes. Well, when we talk about, at least in the UK, there is a narrative about autism, which is very often about special gifts which people have. You kind of described your special gift. It's like you've got that sort of ahead of time way of perceiving the in terms of movements. You really spot it before anyone else. And I'm sure, again, that everyone will have different type of gift, different type of perception dimension, which is falling really nicely with what we are talking about in terms of spiritual dimension as well. And that's where you are obviously a walking, a living proof of bringing spirituality and special needs together, and helping others to understand people with special needs. I think that's part of your very important job, and that's great. So can you tell us a bit more about your actual professional involvement?
Sure. So I was brought into the field of substance use disorder, which is what we refer to as, what used to be referred to as addiction is now referred to as substance use disorder, because we're kind of trying to take all that stigmatizing. And, with a child with a mental health, all that stigma, it just builds and builds. And so we're really working to remove that stigma. And I met a woman that worked in that field, and I had written a children's program that incorporated artwork and drawing and all these different exercises that were really just like self-exploratory, and everybody's experience is very different. But it's interesting because as we were doing it as a group, I was seeing there was also a group experience that was happening, and additionally the individual experience. So it was a confidence building program for girls specifically that I actually was invited to work with the YMCA, which is a really big, they do after school programs here. And I went from doing it with a group of like 8 girls in after school enrichment, with the school, to 60 kids, in a huge gymnasium, which, as you know, with autism, huge gymnasiums don't work very well for us. Oh, no. But it was really interesting because the children would get so engaged, you could hear a pin drop. And so that was really fun for me, and I enjoyed it. And I was like, okay, well, this isn't just for girls. This is also, boys can do, and all ages too. And then I met this woman that worked in this field, and she just looked at me and she said, you should do this work. Like, you are made for this work. And she invited me to come and do what I had written with her class. And she said, just come for one class and let's see what happens. And that class was 18 classes long. And I ended up staying with every class and wrote a new exercise so we would do the exercise that I had provided, and then they would work it. And through working it, because I was having that, extra perception, I would go home and write a new lesson based on what they had done the day before. So what started out as like an 8-part program turned into a 16-part program. And I use some of that with the classes so I teach I work with adult, not always adult, sometimes juvenile drug offenders. So the court sends them to me. So they do not want to be in this class. It's a 15-hour class. They do not want to be there. They've been judged the whole time. And I just start by telling them, this is a place of support and I'm not here to judge you. That's when I tell them my stuff. And I say, we're going to work through this together. And we do. And it's a state class, so it's got a state curriculum. But at the end, they always tell me, I've had people tell me they didn't want it to end, which they're like, this is crazy that I'm saying this, that I want to keep going back to a court-appointed, class. But they also tell me, I get this a lot, that because they didn't feel judged, they felt open to speak. And so I've had people tell me afterwards, I never told anybody that, and tell the whole class, not just me, but, I had a problem with pills. I never told anybody that. Or, and I'm actually saw that I'm past it. Or one guy, he said, I'm ready to give up Xanax. I've always had that as my safety, my fallback. And I realized during this class, I didn't need that anymore. And so even and I see a lot of crossover, right, between mental health, even not diagnosed, with substance use. So I'm very fascinated by that. And so creating that place to be able to talk about some of that stuff, there's a lot of conversation that happens in the class. It's led by that. So but that's how I got into the work, was something else that I'd written for kids led me into this field. And now I do a lot of other things around the same field, but I feel like I want to move on from what we're talking about. So ask me something different.
Yes, absolutely. But what is fascinating is when you are talking about I mean, we definitely have, as human, we definitely have a need for communication and being understood. We want to talk to people without the fear of being judged. And that's the whole fundamental base for the psychotherapy, obviously, but not available to everyone and not necessarily approved by everyone.
Right.
So what I kind of get here is when, especially with people who don't seem to fit in a society in one way or the other, they feel misunderstood, they feel judged. And maybe because of that, they abuse substances. Maybe because of that, they might develop some mental illnesses. Let's call it even as common as depression. And then they are with you, and they feel, oh my gosh, this person understands us. So we can open up and sort of deal with the problem. So this just brings this fundamental importance of trying and understand people who are different than neurotypical, standardized version of, who is an average American, who is an average French or Polish or English.
Right.
Or an average, person living in suburbia in London, or you know what I mean. It's kind of interesting that you are touching on that, and we would need to obviously go into the spiritual side of it as well, as what happens sometimes when we are chatting to members in our group, especially at the beginning, beginners sort of. No, sorry, it's there are no stages as such,
Yeah, right.
but exactly, I'm sort of pedaling back from it.
But people see themselves as beginners. So
Yes, we are all spiritual. Sometimes we just lack that awareness of what's happening to us, with us, and very often we lack vocabulary, and that's I certainly couldn't talk to the teachers, spiritual teachers, because I didn't understand initially what they were on. Even things like spiritual awakening. I mean, a few years later, that did not make any sense to me. So I think with even with the spiritual side, there is a need for understanding and non-judgmental conversation, and just not feeling less or more advanced.
Yeah.
Just feeling so embraced as a person.
Yeah. So you are leading me like so perfectly. And it's funny because I don't put these two things together very often in my mind. But so I think one of the reasons that I do well with my groups that I work with in my classes is because what you're describing right now is the other thing that I do, which is the Traveling Psychic Supper Club, which was literally put together for people to just come and have a dinner, share a dinner, a meal, and talk about their intuitive experiences and talk about, psychic, and I've had people say, well, I wanted to go to a dinner, but I didn't go because I'm not psychic. And I'm like, oh, I wish people would stop saying that, because everybody's intuitive to some degree. Just because you don't charge people to give advice, some people give advice, right? And some people, have set sessions where, there's an exchange, somebody pays, somebody takes away information, right? But everybody's intuitive. And so whenever people would say that, in fact, I just did a private dinner and someone said, oh, this is not what I thought it was going to be at all. And I said, well, tell me what you thought, what did you think it would be? And she said, oh, I'm embarrassed. And we just all spent 2.5 hours together, sharing all these amazing things. But whenever it's almost like when the circle closes back and you're back in normal reality, people don't want to keep sharing. And she said, I thought this was going to be like the lights were out. It was dark. It was a seance. And I was just like, it was very helpful to me because her saying that, I said, oh my God, does everybody think is this what people think this is going to be? Because it's not that at all. It's literally a conversation. And one of the things that is amazing that happens, and it happens with the dinners and it happens in the classes, is somebody will talk about their experience and somebody else will be like, something very similar like that happened to me, but it was a little bit different, right? Because we're all perceiving differently. We all have different skill sets. There's also, not that there's levels, but some people kind of are explosively open while others are kind of just taking, little steps into the water, right? But so it's really, I love having people in all different places of engagement in the same place, because they're able to say, I thought I was the only person that happened to, or, oh my God, I thought I was the only one. And then somebody else will pop up and be like, no, that happens to me all the time, dude. But nobody talks about it. And that's the thing, is people aren't talking about it. And I think, and even the connection with mental health, like while you were talking, I was feeling all the shame that I felt as a parent of a child that was having this experience, and, having people say, oh, well, he just needs to get over it. Or, well,
I've heard that.
You need to discipline him more. And I'm like, well, first of all, he's 13. So, and I just had a conversation with a family member about, discipline, what that looks like. And the funny thing about my son is, even when he was tiny, he presented like as an 80-year-old man. So the idea of, disciplining this person, and I hear that a lot from people, that their child on the spectrum, it presents as just so much older, even if they're nonverbal. Like it's funny because I hear this all the time, like the eyes, right? They'll look at you just like, you're kidding, right? Like, and it's almost like this.
It's
age
exactly
beyond, it's age beyond years, right? And I think that anybody that ends up watching this that has had that experience will absolutely know what I'm talking about. But there
absolutely.
is a lot of shame when something, or, well, what did you do? What did you do wrong? And it's nothing. No, I mean, this is an experience that so many more people are having now. It's
Yes.
and these children have been coming in for a long time, and they are not going away. And
Yeah.
so to be able to understand them, also the spirituality piece, they all connect together. Even this, like you were saying, the substance use piece too, or the mental health piece, which is, I've had tons of people tell me in the class, be like, "You're really intuitive, huh?" And I'm like, "Yeah, to a degree, I'm not going to go into all that in this class, but because people say, yeah, you know what, like I see things all the time, and that's why I started using." And
Exactly.
even so, I'm always playing skeptic in my head, right? Because even
Yeah.
though I do all of these things, I have all of these skill sets, I'm still always saying, the little voice pops up. And so the little voice just popped up that said, "Oh, well, give them an excuse, Deborah. Go ahead and give them an excuse for using substances." But you know what? People use for all different reasons.
Yes.
People are and this is not just about using drugs. This is about, people being in jobs where they're unhappy, or, you can lay that.
Escaping from reality. Yes.
I see it as templates, like templates. You can lay templates over each other all the time, and you can see where we're similar in so many different places. But and I think it's changing. I know it's changing, but there is a lot of, the us and them mentality
Yes.
until you do have a child that is autistic. And then
Yes.
you're like, "Oh crap, I have to find my people now," right? I mean, I have got a very dear, close group of friends that have helped me through this experience. And then were able to help me look at my own experience. And that's when that's when I went to go get the testing. And again, that
Yes.
skeptic in my,
But
mind was saying, "Well, you're just answering the questions the way they should be answered." But actually, I talked to I don't know if I'll say the word right, the diagnostician, the woman who diagnosed me, basically.
yes, yeah, the one who's
And
got the power to give you the
right, has
diagnosis.
the
Yeah.
key in her hand, right? And
Yes,
she
I
said,
experienced them. Yes.
"Oh no, it had nothing to do with the way that you answered the questions. It had to do with how you put the blocks together. It had to do with how long your processing time was with puzzles. It had to do with the story that you made up around the pictures that I showed you." And I was like, there is even a part of me knowing that this is a part of my, mental health makeup. What if I'm making this up? And so there's all this, like,
Yes. I mean, what you
there's
are
so much.
describing is actually a beautiful, very articulate summary of what any parent with a child who's exactly in need of discipline, who's not behaving the way the other kids are behaving, and then going through that diagnosis, going through that worrying whether it's fine or it's not. How is he going or she going to
Right.
live her life? Am I going to be a carer for the rest of my life? There are all sorts of questions uh, which I was going through when my son was being observed and diagnosed, and that's taken for us. It's taken about 2 years going through the healthcare assessments,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and I still remember the day of the assessment, which was partially a huge relief that there is the end of it and there is a diagnosis. And I'm thinking, now I know at least that I wasn't crazy. I wasn't making it up. It
Yep.
was just a different way of processing reality for
Right.
my son. Obviously, part of it was a major shock, and oh my god, as you know, this is autism is described as disability for life, at least in the UK. So partially I had that bittersweet pill to deal with, but I have no issues with supporting my son as much as I can. I have no issue talking about my son being on the spectrum. I actually think that there is much more understanding and awareness still to do. And I don't know about the US statistics. You were talking about many more children being on the spectrum. I think in the UK, we are talking about 6 to 7 kids, 3 to 4 kids in every 10 kids being on the spectrum. So it's 30-40%, 30-35%
right
of children
and
are growing to be adults, obviously, with less or more signs of being on the spectrum, but still.
Well, and how many are not diagnosed, right? I mean, how many, and I mean, that was me. And I'm glad you said what you did about the relief, because I've met some people that get very frustrated whenever people just refer to them as their diagnosis, but and not in autism, just in mental health in general, or, not just spectrum related. But I will say that when I was diagnosed, it was exactly what you just said. It's a huge relief. And then I actually met a woman at a conference who had a son that was autistic, and she spoke. And it was, I was for a while a juvenile case manager. So I've always worked in the courts in one way or another in criminal justice. But she was talking about her son, and I was like, while she was talking, I was like, I do that. I do that. I do that. And I just was like, you learn so much from other people, right? And the characteristics of like, okay, well, I do that, but just a little bit different, right? But it was so freeing, receiving, and I always kind of see it in my head as like a stamp on a paper, like this is, but it's not, I don't see a diagnosis as a bad thing. I just see it as, it's something that now I get to learn from other people that are like me. And some people look at me and they're like, well, you're not autistic because you use the word articulate. I did, I recorded something with someone a couple of days ago, and she used the word articulate. And she said, you're very articulate in getting your point across. And I said, well, that's a piece of what people see as like basic autism that is different for me, right? But I also, I'm high functioning. There's places where, now I'll tell you, I would not be very articulate in a place, like I have to really slow down and focus very much on what I'm saying in places like you were saying, like that are noisy, right? Like the environment, I just know how to keep my environment. Like that's my way of maintaining, right? Because I don't take medication, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with taking medication, because if you have the kind that works for you, then I'm very happy. I have issues with medication. And so for me, I have to just be able to maintain my environment, because there isn't something that I can take that helps me.
Yes, absolutely. That routine and familiarity, which is so important.
Exactly.
Yes. Well, that's also a great advice to people dealing with adults or children on the spectrum, to make sure that those things are provided, like a routine, like a schedule, we with my son, we went through a lot of visual prompts, and that's all works. So again, I'm very grateful for the advice I was receiving from organizations supporting parents, and you are obviously doing a wonderful job providing organizations with that support, sort of translating, interpreting what people with their issues might be experiencing, and neurotypical people, for the lack of better word, might not understand because they don't have the experience simply. So it's very valid and very important, even as you mentioned, now with more children being born with, or maybe more children being recognized, diagnosed, and
both. But I mean, both, right?
Yes. whichever it was the first, chicken or egg. That's the fact.
It doesn't matter, right?
Exactly.
It goes back to it doesn't matter as long as people are getting the supports that they need.
Absolutely.
The purpose does not matter.
Absolutely. And to finish our wonderful chat, I would need to apologize for misleading our audience into believing that your son was actually diagnosed with on the autism spectrum, as he wasn't. Can you tell us more about it? That's fascinating as well.
So yes, and so the reason, I wasn't trying to just throw a bunch of tests, additional tests on for them to do. A lot of his characteristics presented as possibly being on the spectrum. So like he didn't talk till he was 3.5 years old. He was always, and we actually, I've always not joked that we in a way like share a brain, because he does not, even as an adult, and he's 19 now, he does not have to tell me. We always had kind of a little language between us that was like just sounds, like syllables, not words. And again, like he just always seemed very much older than his years. And so he's when as a very young child, like 5 or 6, he was a phenomenal soccer player, like a prodigy, practically skateboarder. He was, for anyone that knows the skateboarding terminology, like he was dropping into bowls at 6 years old, big, huge bowls at 6 years old. We would go to the skate park and he would land tricks that older adults, 19-year-old, 20-year-old kids were like, he just did that. Like, how? I can't do that, and he just is naturally very talented at things. And so, but one of the things that and I know we had talked about this, you and I, was Prodigy is right next to autism. And so I was in a bookstore, and people would always, and this is another thing too that I've learned about prodigy type behavior, which is that person will do the thing, they'll master it, and they'll walk away from it. No matter, like I thought soccer would take my son all the way into college, all the way into, and he had coaches all the time telling him, he could play professionally. He really could if he stayed with this. Mm-hmm. And at the end of high school, he just said, I'm not going to go to college and I'm not going to play soccer anymore. And I, as a parent who had watched this amazing person develop all these years, I was crushed. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, you're not going to use this talent that you have? And he's like, nope, I'm good. And I had to accept there, because there is a lot, right, in our roles as parents of just, you can't push, and you have to accept that this is this person's path, right? I couldn't make him do anything. But going back to the prodigy piece, I was in a bookstore, and I was walking down, and this is exactly how things happen for me all the time. Again, is it intuition? Is it autism? Doesn't matter. I was walking and I stopped, and I turned my head and I looked right at, it was like right at face level, a book that said The Prodigys Cousin. And this book, and I don't know the name of, I don't know who wrote it, but it's a really good book. And it's about how autism and prodigy a lot of times will bump up against each other in bloodlines. Like an autistic, a prodigy parent will have an autistic child, or a prodigy cousin.
Generation, yes.
Right. Or a prodigy cousin will have an autistic cousin or sibling. It was a really interesting book, and I feel like I found it at just the right time, because he showed so many characteristics of autism, finishing up something very quick, not being focused until the very end, and focusing on something. And like, he was homeschooled for a little while, and by, right at the end of the semester, he'd stay up all night, every night for a week, and do all of his work and do well on it. And there's so many different things that kind of go along with the behaviors of autism and prodigy that are very similar to each other. And so because he was exhibiting all those behaviors, that's the reason that I asked them to test him for autism. And he was just shy of the spectrum. Like she was like, if he had answered these 2 or 3 questions a little bit differently, he would have been on the very high functioning end. And then I was like, well, there's so many similarities between some of the things that we do. And I happen to have a colleague at the University of Texas in the he's in the psychiatry over that. I'm not saying that right. I'm sure there's a name for it, but he said, well, there's an organization that is affiliated with UT that you can go and get tested. It's not going to be thousands of dollars. And so that's what I did. That's what I ended up doing. And I did all the testing, all the hours. I went so many times. And, but to get back to your original question, which I might not even go back to, I might not be going back to the original question. I'm sorry. I kind of go off sometimes.
No. It's just amazing how you were thinking your son was on the spectrum. You ended up on the spectrum yourself,
Right.
in a way. And then your son being a prodigy. With all the autistic traits in a way, in terms of behavior. So,
and I think that book is what really helped me to say, okay, he did. And so then I did go back and I said, he does need to be tested. And that's what, that's how that happened.
Yes. What a story. Amazing. Well, it was absolutely wonderful chatting to you, and we will do more chatting. I think it's about time for us to wrap up, and unless you would like to add anything else.
So the next time we talk, I would like to talk about, because you used the word interpreting. I have had the honor of being able to interpret some things for parents regarding their children around autism and even like autistic type of behaviors that I was able to say, well, oh, this is why she's doing this, or, oh, well, this is why he's doing that, and really give parents quite an insight into their child, either because it's something that I've done something similar, or they are doing, and it is, the word interpret is very appropriate. I am able to understand what is happening with the child and interpret it for the parent in a way that they can understand.
Well, I think it will be absolutely amazing if you could do that. We might even get some questions from our members or people.
I would love that.
I mean, I'm connected with, as you mentioned, the power of support and communities sharing similar challenges. So I'm connected with moms with children on the spectrum and variety of disabilities. It's not just autism. We are not.
Anything that I could do to help, I would love to. Just for clarifying, just anything that could help a parent understand their child better, I'm there for.
Beautiful. That's what we want to do, and let's plan for questions and you interpreting those behaviors and challenges the parents are dealing with next time. So thank you so much. It was absolute pleasure having you on, and we'll see you next week, no doubts. So thank you so much, Deborah.
All right. Good to see you.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.